the the Germans back in the early 19th century were having problems, religious problems with the landowners. The poor people's land was really hard to farm, so a lot of them were poverty stricken. And because of the political unrest as Germany started to form as a nation, it became a very appealing place, I guess, would be to come to America. There were some German connections through the Hessians in the Revolutionary War, so they had some knowledge that, okay, here's a place that had a lot of opportunities. So they started migrating here, and and as far as the ones that ended up in Ohio, and specifically here in the Ohio Valley, they came through, in those early years, they were coming through Baltimore into Maryland, and then crossing Pennsylvania, and they maybe a series over a period of years moved from one place to another place to another place, working their way across, and they got to the Ohio River, for the most part probably around Wheeling, and there's kind of a split then of this migration. There's a large group who came into the interior of Ohio, great farmland. They could get it fairly cheaply. They were very industrious. They had these big, beautiful farms with these beautiful brick houses. They're big German barns with the overhangs. And so up in central Ohio, in Franklin County and Fairfield County, you can see how they migrated. You can see it on the landscape still with the old barns and houses. But here in Meigs County specifically, when the Germans that hit at Wheeling, they were, it appeared maybe even a little bit poorer, and they were coming to be miners, and so they came down the Ohio River Valley by flatboat or however they could get here, steamboat, whatever, and they came down to this area, and they ended up being coal miners. Now, they did okay. I mean, that's hard work, and it was dangerous work, and it was dirty work, and it was, but the area prospered because you had this base industry, if you will. We had a lot of salt as well as coal that they were pumping up, and there were a lot of salt works in the area. So the Germans were working in all these businesses. And then wealthier Germans, we had breweries started for them, organ factories, church organs, theater organs, here, furniture factories. So the Germans really started to prosper in this area. Now we have, the area is really just full of signs of those Germans. They had their cemeteries where the stones, the headstones are all in the German language. At the tops of our buildings, the capstones, cornerstones, or whatever, have the names of the German families who came. Our churches, some of our churches, have capstones in German, designating that it was a Deutsche Kirche that had been founded there originally. It got to the place where there were so many Germans in Meigs County that we had at least 7 German language newspapers at one time here in the county. And that was more than there were English language newspapers at the time. So it was that much. If you wanted to work in a retail store, you had, as a clerk, you had to be able to speak both languages, because your customers actually probably more likely to be German speaking than English speaking, even though Meigs County was originally settled by New Englanders, part of the 7 ranges that were originally laid out, Revolutionary War veterans and such. Those were the first settlers in the area, but the Germans quickly outnumbered them. It became that much of a center of German society, if you will, German culture, and it was all, and it just kept going all the way through the 19th century. The towns prospering, and then we hit World War I. In World War I, we have the obvious problem that the United States is now fighting Germany, and we kind of, it was an odd situation where we almost backed into that. of fighting Germany. And so the government made a really big effort through propaganda to make the Germans out to be the bad guys. So many Americans felt as close to them as they did to the English or the French. And so there was a real effort to all this propaganda stuff. Germans are bad, Germans are bad, Germans are bad. Now here in Meigs County, that was very difficult when the majority of your population is German, that you have to make some allowance for that. So in the newspapers, the way they did that was they distinguished that such and such was a good German. He's one of our Germans, as opposed to those Germans, those bad Germans that you hear about over in Germany. And so they made that distinction. But in the process of that, and our participation in the war was really brief, and so this propaganda blitz really wasn't that long. The county commissioners passed a law, an ordinance, if you will, saying that it was illegal to speak German anymore. And so it just came to a screeching halt. Suddenly, all of that, you didn't want to show your Germanness anymore. You wanted to show your American side more. And so it's just like a sudden stopping point that German language just stops after World War I. You still hear occasionally of some families where one of the older people still spoke the language, but they certainly weren't doing it out in public. There weren't any more newspapers anymore. You didn't have to speak German to work in a store anymore. It just came to a halt. And it's really sad in a way, because it's such a big part of how we came to be, and yet now it's just kind of lost. People don't realize how much. The signs are all around them, and people just don't realize it. By the time we get to World War II, where again we're fighting Germany, people didn't realize. By that time, people didn't realize that we were German Americans. We were just Americans by that point. We blended into the point that we were like everybody else, and so we've lost that. It's not like areas like, say, the Pennsylvania Dutch areas where the German culture is still so strong, or they've grasped a hold of it. We've never done that here. We're river people, and we pay attention to the river and all of that, but we've never really tried to get back to that German culture, and it's a shame that we've lost that in the process, because so many of us, the majority of us, our heritages are right back in reverse, all the way back through Pennsylvania and Baltimore, right back to Germany.
The people of North America are the descendants of one of the greatest migrations in history. The mix of culture shapes every aspect of our lives. To understand ourselves, we must know something about our diverse ethnic ancestry. Nothing so defines the North American nations as the motto on the Great Seal of the United States, E pluribus unum, out of many, one.